In 1509, Henry VIII was a 6'2" athlete with a 32-inch waist who could outjoust any man in his court. By 1547, he weighed 400 pounds with a leg ulcer that smelled 3 rooms away. Something killed the king. Doctors blamed everything except what was on his plate. Number 14 on this list was so addictive, Henry consumed 8 pounds of it every single week. Number 3 turned his teeth black before he turned 40. And number 1 is the same dish that killed a different English king 412 years earlier. Hit subscribe and let us count down the 20 forbidden foods Henry VIII devoured before they killed him. Number 20. Manchette bread. The white loaf was the privilege that separated kings from commoners, and Henry ate it 3 times a day. Manchette was made from the finest sifted wheat flour, the bran and germ removed entirely, leaving only the pale, starchy heart of the grain. Bakers in the royal kitchens kneaded it with butter, milk, and a touch of ale yeast, shaping it into small round rolls about the size of a fist. Each loaf was scored with a cross before baking. Henry's kitchens produced over 600 of them a day for the court. Peasants ate dark, dense bread made from rye, oats, and ground beans. Manchette was almost pure, refined carbohydrate, the medieval equivalent of supermarket white bread, and modern nutritionists now know it spikes blood sugar harder than table sugar. Henry ate it slathered in butter with every meal. He did not know what insulin was. His pancreas did. Number 19. Frumenty. This was the porridge that fed every nobleman in Tudor England, and Henry started his days with a bowl of it. Frumenty was cracked wheat soaked overnight, then simmered slowly in almond milk or cream until it turned thick and creamy. The royal version was enriched with saffron, which turned it a deep golden yellow, sweetened with honey, and bound with egg yolks. Sometimes it was served with chunks of venison or porpoise meat stirred in. A single bowl could contain 1,000 calories before noon. Saffron alone cost 4 pounds an ounce in Henry's time, more than most laborers earned in a year. The king ate it from a silver spoon while his minstrels played. The texture was smooth and almost sweet, the kind of food you could eat without chewing. Henry's later years required exactly that kind of food, because his teeth were already failing him. Number 18. Stockfish. The Catholic Church required 150 fast days a year, and Henry, despite breaking with Rome in 1534, kept most of them. On meatless days, the kitchen served stockfish, cod that had been air-dried on wooden racks in Norway until it was hard as a board and nearly indestructible. Cooks soaked the planks in cold water for 3 days to bring them back to something resembling flesh, then pounded them with wooden mallets to break the fibers. The result was rehydrated into a chewy, intensely salty fish that tasted of the cold North Sea. Stockfish was shipped across Europe by the ton because it could last for years without spoiling. The royal household ordered it by the cartload. Henry ate it boiled with mustard sauce, his favorite condiment. He despised fast days and complained about them in letters. He ate the stockfish anyway. A king still had to set an example. Number 17. Pickled herring. If stockfish was the worst part of fast days, pickled herring was the negotiation. Caught in the North Sea by Dutch fishermen and packed in barrels of salt and vinegar, herring traveled to England by the thousand. Henry's kitchens received barrels weekly during Lent, the fish slick and silver, the brine sharp enough to bring tears to a scullion's eyes. The cooks would soak them briefly to remove the harshest salt, then serve them cold with onions and mustard, or grilled over coals until the skin crackled. The oils in herring are now known to be loaded with omega-3 fatty acids, the same compounds doctors prescribe today to fight heart disease. Henry's heart needed every gram he could get, but the salt content was staggering, enough to harden the arteries of a much smaller man. The king ate herring by the dozen at a single sitting. Number 16. Capon. A capon was a rooster that had been castrated as a young bird, then fattened in a cage until it grew to twice the size of a normal chicken. The meat was tender, white, and intensely fatty, prized above any other poultry in Tudor England. Henry's kitchens kept hundreds of capons in pens behind the palace, force-fed with milk-soaked bread and barley until their bellies dragged on the floor. A single capon could weigh 10 pounds at slaughter. The cooks roasted them whole on spits, basting constantly with butter and white wine, the skin crisping into a golden lacquer. Henry ate them with galantine sauce, a thick paste of vinegar, breadcrumbs, and crushed liver. He could finish an entire capon at one sitting and still call for venison afterward. The fat alone in one bird exceeded a modern week's recommended intake. Henry ate one every day. Number 15. Roasted larks. Songbirds were a delicacy reserved almost entirely for nobility, and Henry consumed them by the dozen. Larks, finches, blackbirds, sparrows, and warblers were caught in nets by professional fowlers and brought to the royal kitchens still alive in wicker cages. The cooks plucked them, threaded them onto thin iron spits, sometimes a dozen birds to a single skewer, and roasted them over open flames until the tiny bones turned brittle. Henry ate them whole, beak, feet, bones and all, crunching through them like potato chips. A single lark provided perhaps 2 bites of meat. He could eat 30 in an evening. The dish appears in the royal accounts as small birds, and the kitchens went through thousands of them every season. Nothing about this meal was efficient. Nothing about it was filling. It was eaten purely because the king could. Number 14. Marchpane. Here is the food Henry consumed 8 pounds of every single week. Marchpane was the Tudor name for marzipan, a thick paste of ground almonds and sugar molded into elaborate shapes for the king's table. The royal confectioners sculpted it into castles, ships, animals, and once an entire chess set with edible pieces. Henry could eat a marchpane chess piece in one bite. The sugar in his marchpane came from the Canary Islands and the Madeiras, refined into white loaves that cost more per pound than meat. By 1540, the royal kitchens were ordering over 400 pounds of refined sugar a year, specifically for marchpane production. Henry's physicians prescribed it for melancholy, indigestion, and fatigue. They told him it was medicine. Modern endocrinologists studying Henry's records now believe he had developed full type 2 diabetes by his 40s. Marchpane was not the cure. Marchpane was the cause. First pattern break. Here is what historians have only recently understood. Sugar in Tudor England was a status symbol, not a flavor. A pound of refined sugar cost the equivalent of a craftsman's weekly wage. The richer you were, the more sugar you ate. Henry, the richest man in England, ate more sugar than any human in his country. The nobility competed with each other through sugar consumption the way modern people compete through wine collections. Black teeth became a fashion statement. Women painted their healthy teeth black with charcoal to imitate the royal court. Foreign ambassadors recorded the king's blackened smile and wrote home in shock. Henry did not know that the very thing he was using to display his wealth was destroying his pancreas, rotting his teeth, and laying the groundwork for the obesity that would kill him. His doctors did not know either. Nobody did. Number 13. Quince marmalade. The word marmalade comes from the Portuguese marmelada, made from quinces, not oranges, and Henry was obsessed with it. The quince is a hard, sour fruit that becomes deeply sweet and pink when cooked with sugar for hours. Tudor cooks reduced quinces with 3 times their weight in sugar until the mixture turned into a thick, sliceable paste. Henry ate it after dinner as a digestive, believing it would settle his stomach after the pounds of meat he had just consumed. The royal kitchens kept dozens of pots of quince marmalade in the still room at all times. A single ounce contained roughly the sugar of a modern candy bar. Henry ate it by the spoonful. He shared it with Anne Boleyn during their courtship, recorded in a letter where he calls it the sweetest comfort. The comfort was killing him. Number 12. Spiced gingerbread. Tudor gingerbread bore almost no resemblance to the soft cookies modern Americans know. It was a dense, dark, chewy slab made from breadcrumbs, honey, ginger, cinnamon, pepper, and copious amounts of sugar, pressed into wooden molds carved with the royal arms. Henry's gingerbread was sometimes gilded with actual gold leaf, the thin sheets pressed onto the surface so the cakes shimmered when carried out by torchlight. He ate it as a digestive with Hippocras at the end of feasts. Ginger itself was believed to balance the humors and aid digestion, which gave Henry a medical excuse to eat handful after handful. The sugar in a single slice exceeded what a peasant family consumed in a year. The court physicians prescribed it for the king's bowel troubles. The king's bowel troubles got worse. The doctors prescribed more gingerbread. Number 11. Beaver tail. This is where the Catholic Church's fast day rules met creative theology. Henry's clergy declared, with straight faces, that the beaver was a fish because it spent most of its life in water. This meant beaver meat could be eaten on Fridays and during Lent. The tail was the prized cut, a slab of pure fat that wobbled like aspic when sliced. Imported from the rivers of Scotland and Scandinavia, beaver tails were salted, smoked, and served roasted with mustard sauce. The texture was rich and oily, somewhere between bacon and goose fat. Henry ate them on fast days when his hunger for red meat could not be ignored. The clergy ate them too, and called it devotion. Beaver tails are mostly saturated fat with very little protein. Modern cardiologists would look at the king's fast day diet and call it a heart attack on a plate. Number 10. Whale meat. By the same Catholic logic that turned beavers into fish, whales were also considered seafood, and Henry's kitchens served them throughout Lent. Right whales hunted in the Bay of Biscay by Basque fishermen were rendered for oil, but the meat was salted and shipped to royal courts across Europe. The flesh was dark, dense, and tasted strongly of the sea, with a texture closer to beef than fish. Cooks boiled it for hours to soften the muscle, then served it with peppered vinegar and onions. Henry preferred it cooked in milk to mask the gaminess. A single barrel of salted whale meat could feed the royal household for a week. The mercury content of large marine predators is now known to be dangerously high, and Henry consumed whale dozens of times a year for 30 years. We will never know how much heavy metal was in his system when he died. We can guess. Number 9. Porpoise. The smaller cousin of the whale, porpoise was considered the finest of all fast-day meats and reserved for the highest tables. Henry's accounts show payments to fishermen for fresh porpoise delivered live to the kitchens at Greenwich and Hampton Court. The cooks butchered them on the spot, marinated the meat in vinegar and salt to cut the oiliness, then roasted it on spits like beef. The flesh turned dark and almost sweet when properly cooked, and it was served with a yellow sauce of bread, sugar, and ginger. Henry would carve the first slice himself. The fat content was extreme, the meat marbled with thick streaks of blubber. Porpoise is now a protected species in most of the world. In Henry's England, it was Friday dinner. Number 8. Sturgeon. By ancient law dating back to King Edward II, every sturgeon caught in English waters belonged to the king. Henry's kitchens received them whole, sometimes 8 feet long and 400 pounds, hauled into the palace on wooden sledges. The fish was prized above all others for its firm white flesh, which the cooks served in thin slices poached in white wine and topped with a saffron and ginger sauce. The eggs, what we now call caviar, were salted lightly and eaten with manchet bread and butter. A single sturgeon could feed a banquet of 60 guests. Henry consumed sturgeon at least weekly. The fish is now nearly extinct in European waters, hunted to collapse partly by the royal demand that started with kings like Henry. The flesh itself was healthy. The portion sizes were not. Second pattern break. Here is the math nobody in Tudor England could do. Henry's daily caloric intake at the height of his eating, around 1540, has been calculated by modern historians at over 5,000 calories a day. He consumed roughly 4,500 of those calories from meat and dairy. He ate almost no vegetables. The Tudors believed raw fruits and vegetables caused disease and only consumed them when stewed beyond recognition with sugar. Henry once issued a royal proclamation discouraging the consumption of fresh fruit because it caused the bloody flux. He preferred his food cooked, salted, and sweetened. His gout, which began in his 30s, was a direct consequence of the rich, purine-heavy meats he consumed daily. By his 40s, his urine reportedly tested positive for kidney stones, also a result of the diet. Every meal was making him sicker. Every meal was also confirming his power. Number 7. Roasted peacock. The peacock was the most theatrical dish in the Tudor kitchen. The bird was skinned carefully so that the feathers remained intact on the hide, then roasted with the head and tail kept aside. After cooking, the cooks reassembled the bird, sewing the feathered skin back over the body, propping the head up with wires, and fanning the tail in full display. The peacock was then carried into the great hall by torchlight, its plumage shimmering as if alive. Henry would carve it himself at the high table. The meat was tough and gamey, more impressive than delicious, often soaked in milk for a day before cooking to tenderize it. He ate it for the spectacle more than the flavor. Peacock at Henry's table announced to every ambassador in the room that the English king could afford to eat color itself. Number 6. Roasted swan. To this day, all mute swans in open waters of England belong to the crown, a tradition that began centuries before Henry, but reached its peak under his reign. The king's swan herds marked the beaks of every cygnet hatched in royal waters, and any unmarked bird could be claimed by the throne. Henry's kitchens roasted swans at Christmas, Easter, and royal weddings, the birds basted with butter and rose water until the skin turned golden. The meat was dark, fishy, and almost unpleasant, but like the peacock, the dish was about display. Cooks served the swan with its long neck propped upright on the platter, a small crown of pastry placed on its head. The flesh has been compared by modern eaters who have tried it to a cross between duck and liver, with a strong, gamey aftertaste that even Henry's sauces could barely mask. He ate them anyway. Number 5. Hippocras. This was the wine that flowed through Henry's court like water through a mill. Hippocras was red wine infused with sugar, ginger, cinnamon, cloves, and grains of paradise, then strained through a wool bag known as Hippocrates' sleeve, which gave the drink its name. The king drank it warmed, served in silver cups, sometimes a gallon a day. The sugar content alone was staggering, roughly the equivalent of 40 modern soft drinks per serving. Hippocras was believed to aid digestion, warm the blood, and stimulate the appetite for love. Henry's physicians prescribed it for everything. He drank it with breakfast, with dinner, after supper, and before bed. The combination of alcohol and sugar created a daily metabolic load no human body was designed to handle. By his 50s, Henry's liver was likely cirrhotic. His bloated face in his final portraits is consistent with chronic alcohol abuse. The Hippocras did not love him back. Number 4. Venison pasty. Hunting was Henry's lifelong passion, and the deer he killed personally were turned into the most prized dish in the royal kitchens. Venison pasty was a thick pastry crust filled with chunks of red deer marinated in red wine, beef suet, and warm spices, sealed and baked for hours until the crust turned dark and the meat inside became impossibly tender. The pastry itself was not always eaten in Henry's day. It served as a baking vessel, holding moisture in and keeping the meat fresh for weeks. The king broke the crust at the table with the point of his knife, releasing a cloud of fragrant steam, and scooped the meat onto silver plates. Venison was leaner than beef, but Henry ate it with so much suet, so much wine reduction, so much rich sauce, that the original health benefit was lost completely. He could finish an entire pasty meant to serve 6 men. Third pattern break. Here is the thing nobody in Henry's court ever wrote down because they did not know. Henry's silver and pewter plates contained lead. His pewter goblets contained more lead. The lead used to seal wine barrels leached into his Hippocras. The lead pipes that carried water to his kitchens added another dose. Modern toxicologists studying the symptoms recorded by Henry's doctors, the headaches, the mood swings, the violent rages in his final years, the gout, the abdominal pain, the cognitive decline, now believe the king was likely suffering from chronic lead poisoning on top of everything else. The food was killing him. The plates that held the food were killing him. The cups that held the wine were killing him. A Tudor king could have anything in the world brought to his table. Almost all of it, one way or another, was poison. Number 3. Sugar comfits. These were the candies that turned Henry's teeth black before he turned 40. A comfit was a seed, nut, or spice, usually fennel, coriander, caraway, or aniseed, coated with layer after layer of hardened sugar through a slow process of repeated dipping and drying. The royal confectioners worked for days to build up the shells, the finished comfits round and smooth and white as pearls. Henry kept silver dishes of them on his bedside table, in his study, in his audience chambers, and beside his throne. He sucked on them constantly between meals, all day, every day. By his late 30s, foreign ambassadors were describing his blackened smile in horrified letters home. By his 40s, abscesses in his jaw were causing him agonizing pain. Tudor dentistry consisted of pulling rotten teeth without anesthetic. Henry refused most extractions. He kept eating the comfits. The bacteria from his rotting mouth likely entered his bloodstream, contributing to the infections that destroyed his health. Number 2. Stuffed boar's head. The Christmas feast at Henry's court began with the ceremonial carrying of the boar's head, a tradition stretching back into Anglo-Saxon England that the king elevated into pure theater. The head was severed from a wild boar killed in the royal forests, then boned, stuffed with forcemeat, sausage, and chestnuts, and roasted until the skin crackled. The tusks were polished and reinserted. The eyes were replaced with hard-boiled eggs. An apple or orange was placed in the mouth. The whole head was then carried in on a gold platter by 4 servants, preceded by trumpets and a choir singing the boar's head carol. Henry carved the first slice himself. The meat was incredibly rich, marbled with the fat of an animal that had run wild in oak forests eating acorns. He could eat the entire snout in one sitting. The cholesterol in a single serving exceeded most modern weekly recommendations. Number 1. Lampreys. Here is the dish that killed 2 English kings 412 years apart. In 1135, King Henry I died after eating a surfeit of lampreys against his physician's advice. Henry VIII, knowing this history perfectly well, ate them anyway. Lampreys are jawless, eel-like parasites that attach to other fish with a ring of teeth and feed on blood. They live in the River Severn and were considered the greatest delicacy in medieval England, more valuable than any other fish, more prized than any meat. The royal kitchen stewed them in their own blood, thickened with breadcrumbs and red wine, seasoned with ginger and cloves. The dish was almost black in the bowl. Henry ate it specifically as a gesture of royal defiance, declaring his appetite stronger than his ancestors. He ate them every Lent. He ate them when his doctors begged him to stop. They were rich, oily, and parasitic. The combination of intense fat, blood, and possible bacterial contamination from the lampreys themselves likely contributed to the gut infections that plagued him for years. On the day Henry VIII died, January 28, 1547, his last recorded meal had included a stewed lamprey from the Severn. He had outlived his namesake by 412 years and matched him in the end at his own table. Here is the challenge. Try one of these this week. Just one. Bake a real Tudor gingerbread with pepper and ginger and dark molasses. Stew a quince. Soak a salt cod. Then sit down and ask yourself what we forgot when we stopped eating like royalty actually ate. Because these were not just dishes, they were declarations. Every plate at Henry's table said the same thing. I am the king and I can eat anything I want. And in the end, that is exactly what killed him. Tell me in the comments which one you would have refused to serve him. I want to know if anyone would have looked Henry VIII in the eye and told him to put down the lamprey.